in the paper. Artist Luise Pershing reweds first husband. That's in the one book paper. And then artist ex-husband wed again. So you can see this Louise Nevelson before Louise Nevelson.
My favorite.
But going back a little bit, because this was an opportunity to show that piece, which she had. And it's an enigma, but this was the first opportunity to actually show it in a museum. So I've opened Pandora's box by showing this. I'm opening myself up to or the painting to the skeptics and the believers. And fortunately, there seem to be more believers than skeptics in this case. Well, anyway, Mary Shaw was the grande dame of Pittsburgh art for many, many years. And some people must know Mary Shaw and her work. And she was a woman of the 20s, and I was a guy of the 60s. You know, so we clicked when we met. So we would go to various things. I was her date for, I think, her 70th reunion at Carnegie Tech. It was her and one other guy from that class. I mean, they did many classes, but only from their class. So she calls me one day and she said, Pat, this is after Louise Pershing had passed away 4 years prior to. She said, Persh's son's in town, all her art's there, we gotta get over there. So she takes me over there, introduces me to her, Tom Murdoch, who was Louise Pershing's second husband, Dr. Murdoch, who, as we know, got replaced. And it was a big house on College. And there were beautiful windows, you know, those diamond kind of cross wood. And all her sculptures, many, you know, were all lined up there. And then in the middle of the room was Tom's motorcycle. He liked motorcycle and NASCAR, so he had a different aesthetic, I guess, than his mother Louise. So, and he also had that horrible rheumatoid arthritis, and he had lost his legs. And so I without any background in anything, I said, I think I could help you with a sale here. So he gave me the key. He gives me the key, and I don't know where he was staying, I forget. So I go over there, and so one day I'm down in the basement, and it reminds me very much of many collectors, going through stacks of things, and down there was that. And Tom had said that in the last years, that the caretakers who don't really care all that much, but they do take, were stealing her jewelry. So I like to think that she thought that they ain't getting that, and she hid it. So I did work on this stage, we didn't sell any art. And Louise. She had a 1949 big print of this by Picasso, and we sold it through Sotheby's. I don't know how I did that stuff. I guess I just make moquette on the phone. It's a little hard to see, but here's a photograph of that same room where she's showing the piece, and she used to sit over here as she's sitting in that other photograph. She would sit there. So this is years after this photograph. I don't know how many years. I think maybe late 30s, early 40s. But here is that piece sitting on a little table in an empty room, the same room. So anyway, we had the sale, and I told I thought that had possibilities. It wasn't, you know, and I told Tom, and I had it in a closet. When dealers or certain people would come over, I'd show them in the closet. So one day he comes back and he said, well, Pat, I've sold the house and everything's going to an auction. And then he left. He went to like Nag's Head or someplace with his girlfriend, and no forwarding number, no anything. So I assumed, when you, that he took that with him. But he did not. And one day, and after a trip up in New York City, I'm reading the newspaper, the Times, in 1994. I know this story, but I know that it's a sort of a long story, so I'm trying to clip along. In the newspaper is William Rubin, from MoMA, who put on the 1980 retrospective, the huge retrospective. So he here talks about Pablo Picasso, Sarah Murphy, and her husband Gerald Murphy. There's a photograph over there of them. They were expats living in Paris, and they were jazz age, and they were magnets for everyone. So let's see, Cole Porter, Hemingway, John F. Scott Fitzgerald, Zelda, of course, Leger, Picasso. Picasso had the lust for Sarah Murphy. He's married to Olga, and they meet in 1921, and then he follows them up to the north of France. He's in Dinard, where he paints the blue one. He paints this blue piece, which is about this big, which is unsigned, and he kept it all his life, and that's why it's in the Picasso Museum. So I like to think that this is Olga, and that this is Sarah Murphy. That's just my theory. But anyone who's in people who are art historians or writers, or I've met a few, they don't like hearing that. They don't want to hear any theory. That's irrelevant. But it's my theory. And then he follows him down to the Riviera. He takes his mother, his wife, and his son Paulo, and they have 3 children, the Murphys. And they spend this wonderful summer. And then the next summer he comes back again to the Riviera. I don't know who he brings. And then Gerald Murphy goes to Italy with Cole Porter to do a big opera or something. And I think that's when Sarah Murphy said, "No, Pablo, no." So he had been painting a big painting of the guy with the pan flute. She was in that. He painted that out. So that's just another theory.
Well, he did that often. I said he did that often, Picasso. He painted over his paintings.
Yes. And he also liked triangles. A couple women, triangle, and him. So how did I acquire all these? There were auctions at Royal York where I bought, and then at one point, the owner of that auction company gave me the phone number, took me over to a warehouse and gave me the phone number of the granddaughter. Her father, Tom, was gone, and I read this article. Oh, that's right, I better tie that together. In this article, it talks about, it was the first time I read that Gerald Murphy, who I really didn't know, I don't think I knew much, if anything, about the Murphys, but I sure learned a lot. His father had Mark Cross luxury goods, salary, leather goods in New York City, and in the 30s, he becomes sick, so the Murphys come back to the States. And Gerald Murphy is the president of this company and gets it off its bad financial stuff and makes it successful again. And then Luise Pershing's first and third husband, Dennis Berlin, he he worked for Gimbel Brothers, and then I knew from the archives in Luise's basement that he was also the president of Mark Cross. So when Murphy retires, he becomes a president. So it's a great story that maybe because he knows Gerald Murphy and whatever, but so maybe it comes to Luise that way, but maybe it doesn't. But it's a tie-in, and just more of the intrigue. So from the granddaughter, I bought many pieces, sculpture and some paints. I'm not sure which ones. And other things that I put in here are things from Luise's collection. Like this was in her house. This museum cast was in her house. Over by Meg is a painting by Saul that I love. That was in her collection. Those pieces out there in the hallway, these African pieces, and so I wanted to have things from her collection, her work, things from her collection, and that to show. And that's enough. Not enough? Any questions?
What happens next week?
Or what happens next is, thanks Lawrence. It's always been, there's a French law called the droit moral, and that means that the moral right, only a person with the blood of the artist can say, my dad did that, or my mother did that, and for a deceased artist. So Pablo had 4 children. His son, who died in the 70s, Maya with Marie Trace Walters, who used to authenticate until his son Claude with Francois Gillet, because she was authenticating and he was authenticating, but not always on the same page. And the market, it was too much. So Claude got together with 2 of the grandkids, his sister Paloma and himself, and they voted Maya out, so she could no longer authenticate. And so she was out. And then Claude, for 40 years, he started, there was a big case, because Picasso died without a will. So it was all like, well, I don't know. And there were taxes. So they set up the Picasso administration. The government somehow said, okay, you're the guy. And he started the Picasso administration where only Claude, after a while, only Claude, from like 1950 on, could say, yes, he did. Well, here's how it works. Claude, now Paloma, because Claude died recently, and he put her into his position. So not only Paloma and preceding her, Claude could say, if they, either one of them, or now Paloma says, yes, my father did that, and he really didn't, then he did. And if she says, my father did not paint that, and he really did, then he didn't. So I've had this for 28 years, and any time from then till today, I could do what the Picasso administration said. Send us a photograph, a black and white photograph, X meters or whatever, centimeters, and give us the provenance. That's it. They don't want you to bring this to them and have experts besides themselves look at it. And I have photographs here of what it looks like out of the film. It's a thick piece of wood. And I don't know if he did it, but I know that Professor Kenneth Silver believes he did. He's an art history at NYU, and Rachel Adler, a dealer in New York, and who else, man? You. So I can do that, but I've had such a great time with him. It's taken me to the top of the New York art scene, and we've gone to Paris, and we've gone to Rome, and so I just don't want to send a black and white photograph and they get around to it, like it comes in the mail and say, what do you say? No. So what comes next is Paloma's been in since July. She used to hang out with Andy Warhol. she was a Studio 54 kind of a dancer, and Andy painted her, and so I think she might have a little more than Claude might have. And even though she didn't know her father, or didn't see him except once when she was a teenager, for a few minutes on the street, and Jacqueline, the wife at the time, said, "Come on, Pablo, we gotta go." So since she was about 8 years old, no connection. And Claude, when he was 20, he was like 20 something, and he wanted to introduce his fiancee to his father, and Jacqueline wouldn't let him. She said, "The master is on in." So, so these children who had no connection, they're the ones that yes or no. So it's an odd situation, but I think now with Paloma, I'm going to talk to people who might know her, and maybe one of them that believes in the piece would say, she's in New York, she lives in Geneva and Morocco, and just catch her on a good, nice day, and she's in a good mood, and she said,
Wear her perfume.
really, I mean, what's it to her? I don't know. So, any other questions?
Hey Pat, what about Luise Pershing's engagement in the local Pittsburgh art community, and can you talk a little bit about
What's the
that?
question?
Luise Pershing's engagement in the local Pittsburgh art community.
Well, she, in the early 50s, she had a modern art gallery called 130 Bellevue on Belfield Avenue off of between 5th and Bayard. And all the ones that we know and like, all the modernists, showed there. The sculptor Henry B. and Glenn Davis and Kaczynski, they all showed there at the gallery. It was probably very much like this. It was an old house on Bellevue, and I have photographs of that. So as these shows move along, I'm the keeper of a lot of people's lives. Like Glenn Davis, he was a Pittsburgh modernist. He was a bachelor. He lives with me. His work and his archives and just papers and stuff. Pittsburgh history, and beyond that, when she remarries Berlin, they go to New Hope, and she starts a gallery in New Hope, Pennsylvania. I don't know, I guess I could say this. So things, she's remarried and things are going pretty good, but the story I was told, and I can't remember who told me. So I got this from whatever horse's mouth. She comes home and she sees that is in bed with the plumber's wife. So it was over. She comes back, lives on College Street. So she'd been all around everything, but she ends up back in Pittsburgh on College Street. And she had a big show at University of Indiana, I know, and I don't know, are you familiar with Henry Kerner?
Yeah.
And if you ever met Henry Kerner, he was about like this, but he was like this. And he was a fantastic artist, and he would tell you there are only two artists in art history of the world that matter: Cézanne and him, Henry. So in amongst papers, I see that Pershing and Kerner had a show together at the old Pittsburgh Plant for Art in the King's Estate out in Highland Park, and so I knew him a little bit, and so I said, "Henry, I see that you had a show with Luise Pershing." He said, "Pershing, she's the only one. She slapped me in my face." And so you can only imagine, because I've heard stories of the way he treated students, putting paper bags out, and say, this is shit. And one time I was in a van, and Henry, who was Austrian, had an Austrian hat, one of those with the thing that comes up like that. So he's on that bicycle with the baskets, and he came flying down Myron or one of those, right on the floor there, right in the middle of traffic. And I thought, what's he up to? So he pulls over at Kinko's, so I pull over. He's in there to Xerox his Life magazine, oh, not Life, Time magazine covers. And I had a couple, so he gave me some of those, like, you know what? So I put his bike and him into, for a little escapade. So we went a couple places, and we went over to Okoya, where there was a painting, and then Nancy and I had a painting by John Cleveland, my favorite artist. He'll be in Patrick's Picks, the last go-round here, John Cleveland. So, he has that hat on, and he goes up to the painting, and he says, "Oh, it's beautiful here. Oh, the color here." And then he comes back over and looks at it. He said, "But it has no lasting meaning." So, yeah, a couple things going on for it, but, you know, somehow it wasn't up to his standards.
So tell everybody what the next show is. That's what I think.
Okay, this
Sunday
time,
shows on Sunday?
this time yesterday, so it can't be, that's tomorrow. Next Saturday is the Warhola family of artists. I think I'll have 4 generations, and the Howard Finster family of artists with 3 generations. Howard Finster is a self-taught artist. He's like the granddaddy of the contemporary self-taught. He's gone for a while now. And I met him through REM, when I was a concert promoter. And then I went down to, and I knew they were friends, I went down to Atlanta for their big show in the Fox Theater. And I asked Michael where I could find Howard Finster, because I'd already seen him on the Johnny Carson show. And I would highly recommend putting in there Howard Finster on the Johnny Carson show, because it's unbelievable. And that was back around 1981 or something. So I saw